Moving on, Abuela finds Mirabel weeping beside a river. Mirabel says to her grandmother, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt us. I just wanted to be something I'm not." Okay, so Mirabel has finally now admitted to herself and to Abuela that her quest to save the miracle was motivated in large part by her desire to be someone special. She wanted to be the one who saved the magic. She wanted to be the one who was responsible for preserving the gifts that have so long been denied to her. She wanted to be the girl who is the key to everything. She wanted respect from others and from herself. In short, she wanted to have everyone's esteem. Now, these are understandable desires, and frankly, I empathize with her. Considering the loneliness and neglect she's been feeling for so long, that makes perfect sense that she would want these things. She seems to acknowledge that her hunger for approval and recognition have actually resulted in the annihilation of the magic and the destruction of their home. And we've seen a couple of times throughout the film that her true motivations were more selfish than she wanted to admit, so it's actually nice to have this payoff where she finally admits it. But I still have questions. As I mentioned in the scene summary, we don't know why the house actually collapsed. I can't call it impossible that this family has never had a fight or argument in the last 50 years and that there's never been any anger or shouting, but that seems pretty unlikely. And if anger and shouting and fighting and disharmony are what caused the magic to become snuffed out, then what was going on with the cracks at Antonio's party? Everyone was having a great time. There was no shouting, there was no anger, except, I suppose, for Mirabel, and yet the cracks appeared anyway. If, on the other hand, it's just that the strength of the magic depends on how much love and acceptance Mirabel is feeling from her grandmother at any given time, then does that mean that Mirabel has a gift after all? And her gift is that if she gets unhappy or feels left out or sad, then the magic fails? That seems pretty strange and oddly specific, and it would make me wonder whether the magic was indestructible until Mirabel was born, which would also mean that it's Mirabel's fault the magic is vulnerable. Or alternatively, maybe it's just that the magic was failing for some other reason and time just happened to run out right as she and her grandmother were yelling at each other, which would be a colossal coincidence, I think. But more to the point, why is Mirabel now, again, so willing to accept culpability for what just happened when moments ago she said this?
You're the one breaking our home!
Don't you
The miracle is dying because of you!
Once again, did she actually believe that this was her grandmother's fault, or was she just making stuff up to deflect blame? At the risk of repeating myself, I have no idea, because we as the audience aren't any closer to understanding how this miracle actually works and what is required to maintain it than we were 78 minutes ago. And crucially, neither are any of the characters. Whatever the reason for this change of heart, our heroine has jumped from thinking that maybe she might be to blame to then blaming it all on her grandmother to now jumping back to blaming it all on herself. But hey, at least Mirabel apologized for her perceived wrongs, which is more than some characters can say. Abuela sits down beside Mirabel and says that this river is the place they received their miracle, the place she lost her husband, and she hasn't been able to visit it since. We then get an extended flashback of a young Abuela before she was, well, Abuela. And by the way, the credits tell us that Abuela's first name is Alma, even though we actually never hear anyone call her that. But for the sake of clarity, I'm going to use the name Alma when referring to the younger version of Abuela. In this flashback, there's also a song voiced over that is absolutely beautiful, but I'm not going to spend much time talking about it since the lyrics are all in Spanish. And as I said, I happen to speak Spanish, but this is the English version of the film, and so I can't consider the lyrics relevant to the writing as they will be incomprehensible to the majority of the audience. But it is a beautiful song. And I have to admit that despite my objective criticisms of the film thus far, this flashback sequence and the song that plays over it actually coalesce to form one of the most poignant and emotionally moving few minutes of cinema that I have ever seen. And honestly, I still get a little choked up every time I watch it. So well done on this scene in particular, but we will have to see how it integrates with the rest of the story. We see young Alma and Pedro catch each other's eye in a crowd, and they spend some time laughing over a lunch break, and then they're getting married in a church. That's a pretty efficient courtship, but hey, still sweet. Skip ahead, and Alma presents to Pedro a little paper doll, presumably as a way of announcing that she is pregnant. She then unfolds it, revealing three dolls. And wait, how could she possibly know that she's going to have triplets? Now, I don't know what time period exactly this is supposed to be in, but I don't see any electricity anywhere, and she's not even showing her pregnancy a little bit. So how could she? It's cute. It's fine. It's fine. We know that she's having triplets, so I guess that's enough for the characters to know. Anyway, we see them sometime later with their three little babies, and it's lovely. But then we see the flicker of firelight through the window, and Pedro and Alma gape in horror as sinister horsemen lay torches to the village, and the neighbors flee in panic. In company with some of the other villagers, they abandon their home, seemingly in no great hurry, which is a bit odd. But hey, I guess they weren't expecting any pursuit, but oh no, pursuit there is! The villagers start running, but Pedro has a different idea. He kisses each one of his three children, and oh, there it is, there it is. This every time movie, every time. This is the precise moment that I start to feel that itching at the corner of my eyes because I know full well what's about to happen and the decision that Pedro is making here. I have three children of my own, and I simply cannot help imagining what I would do if I knew that I was never going to see them again and that they were going to grow up without me. Dang it, movie, you got me, okay? You got me. Moving on. Pedro leaves Alma holding their three children and a single candle, and then turns back to confront the pursuing horsemen. One of them brandishes a sword, and we turn back to see Alma torn with unspeakable anguish. Her husband, the love of her youth and the father of her three infants, has just been murdered before her eyes in an attempt to save their lives. The candle flashes, and a blaze of light blasts the horsemen away as mountains rise out of the ground, creating the valley that has protected the Encanto ever since. But this safety and security seem to be of little consolation to the widowed Alma. As she cradles her children, her stunned grief hardens into a stony resolve. We hear Abuela's voice saying, I was given a miracle, a second chance, and I was so afraid to lose it that I lost sight of who our miracle was for. As she says this, we see her walking past imaginary versions of Bruno, Isabella, and Luisa, each one snapping to attention with fear in their eyes as she passes. At last, she sees young Mirabel on the day her door disappeared, looking up at her grandmother with sadness and confusion. The flashback fades as Abuela tells her granddaughter, I am so sorry. You never hurt our family, Mirabel. We are broken because of me. I want to like this. This brief sequence in isolation tells a better, more coherent, and more poignant story, frankly, than the rest of the film put together. Unfortunately, it does not exist in isolation. It is meant to be the climatic payoff for Abuela and Mirabel's relationship and the critical moment of their respective character arcs. Alma's backstory here is intended to recontextualize her character and to invite the audience and Mirabel to empathize with somebody who was previously thought of as an antagonist. Alma never really dealt with the grief of losing her husband. This magical candle was not only a great boon to her family and the community, and it was not only a source of protection and safety, but it was also to her the last reminder of her beloved Pedro, the man whose sacrifice somehow brought about this miracle. Were she to lose the magic of the Encanto, she would figuratively lose her husband all over again, and that is a prospect that terrifies her. Okay, that is all fine. However, none of what we have just learned about her past is actually new, either to Mirabel or the audience. Abuela told Minimira all about the origin of the Encanto, including her grandfather's violent death in the first 2 minutes of the film. The only thing this flashback actually adds is some snapshots of the young couple, a heartwarming musical track, and we can see a more raw and visceral emotional reaction in Alma's face at the untimely demise of her husband. The big reveal here is supposed to be that Abuela is still wrestling with grief, and that as a result of that, she is afraid of losing the miracle, and that fear is informing how she treats the family. But we already knew that she was afraid of losing the miracle. She's made that very plain from the beginning. And anyone with a functioning prefrontal cortex should already be aware that watching your husband get murdered before your eyes would likely cause intense suffering and pain. We didn't actually need to see her relive the moment in order to assume that it was traumatic for her. The one possibly new element here is that while Abuela has openly acknowledged her loss and pain from the beginning, she seemed that after 50 years she had kind of gone through the grief and was now relatively well adjusted. And she speaks of Pedro with some sadness, sure, but who wouldn't? In other words, we had kind of gotten the impression that by the time Mirabel entered the family, Abuela had more or less completed a healthy process of grief and healing, only now we learned that that's not the case at all. Now, to be clear here, I can absolutely buy that Abuela's inability to completely heal from her own bereavement would cause her to act in seemingly extreme, cold, or irrational ways. I'm no expert in grief psychology, but from the little bit I do know, this seems plausible. The problem, then, as I've noted, is that we either already knew or could have been able to infer all of these things about her character from the introduction of the film. So, what exactly is this flashback supposed to be changing? What have we learned about her here that is supposed to make her decisions make more sense? Nothing, because we haven't learned anything about her at all. There's no recontextualization because no new context has been added. Moving on, Mirabel then sees a butterfly, which she remembers is an image that she saw briefly in the extended cut of Bruno's vision. The two of them wade out into the water where Mirabel says, I finally see. You lost your home, you lost everything. You suffered so much all alone so it would never happen again. We were saved because of you. We were given a miracle because of you. We are a family because of you, and nothing could ever be broken that we can't fix together. Abuela replies, I asked my Pedro for help. Mirabel, he sent me you. So this all sounds very nice, but I'm still confused about how we've arrived at this point. Mirabel has known her entire life that her grandmother was a refugee, that her grandfather died during the escape, and that her abuela has had the magic candle ever since. And of course, they are a family because of Abuela, which shouldn't be news to anyone who knows how families work. I also think it's a bit odd that Mirabel says they were given a miracle because of Abuela, while the impression I got is that they were given a miracle because of Pedro. I don't know why the grandfather's sacrifice is not being acknowledged here, but regardless of that, Mirabel was well aware of all of this at least 10 years ago. She's probably never thought about just how painful an experience that must have been for her grandmother, since children don't readily think of anything outside themselves, but is that all? For the first time in her life, Mirabel has finally considered what it would be like for her grandmother to endure forced exile and young widowhood, and Abuela has now given her granddaughter a more personal and detailed view of the pain she endured all those years ago, and that's resolved everything? The conflict between these two has been a bit confused throughout the film anyway, but is this all it took to fix it? And what does any of this have to do with the magic anyway? Wait a minute. Is the movie trying to tell us that the strength of the magic is a reflection of the relationship between Mirabel and her grandmother? How did things work before Mirabel was born then? Or if the magic is a reflection of the health of the family as a whole, or maybe of the attention and individual love that Abuela gives to each of the family members, then why has everything come crashing down now? Is it just because Mirabel and her grandmother had a shouting match? Has that really never happened before? Maybe it was the additional strain and confusion caused by Mirabel's failure to receive a gift that made the difference, but then again, why didn't she get a gift? There is only one way that I have been able to make sense of this after racking my brain for quite some time. I think we are supposed to take Abuela at her word that the miracle broke because of her, that the strength of the magic is a reflection of the sincerity of her love for the individual members of the family. I don't know why she would believe this, since the film has been unwilling to acknowledge that the miracle might come from a being that has a corresponding moral code, but we will just see where this leads. The candle, or whatever force or entity is behind the miracle, God, not God, Pedro's ghost, that who knows, whoever this entity is perhaps knew that Abuela was going to be so busy trying to maintain the miracle that she would forget to love the members of her family on an individual level. Thus, the entity gave her a granddaughter with no gift. This would force Abuela to confront her weakness, as she would have to learn to love someone who had nothing to offer in terms of magical abilities. Abuela mostly failed at this, neglecting Mirabel so badly that she accidentally forgot to include her in a family photo, ultimately resulting in the destruction of the miracle altogether. This is the best that I can come up with in terms of a logical through line, but there are even a couple of problems with this. If Mirabel's failed gift ceremony was a deliberate act on the part of whatever entity is behind the Encanto, then that would mean that Abuela was wrong to interpret it as a sign that the magic was in danger, although it's understandable that she would see it that way. But this means that the magic didn't actually show any symptoms of growing weak until Antonio's party, but Abuela says that she's been afraid of losing the miracle since she received it 50 years ago. So, if her fear and the consequent neglect of her family is the root of the problem, then we need some explanation as to why the magic showed no actual signs of failing until yesterday and then has literally come crashing down within 24 hours. If Abuela needed to learn a lesson about how to love people for their own sake without ulterior motives, then why did the candle wait so long to deny someone a gift? Why not one of the triplets? Shoot, why would the candle give anyone magical powers at all? What was the point of all of this? But I know that there is no bottom to this rabbit hole since I'm now trying to decipher the motivations of a mysterious otherworldly entity that I have invented in order to try and make sense of this confused script. Now, to be fair, I usually appreciate a certain degree of subtlety in storytelling. I don't actually want everything to be spelled out explicitly, but we've now reached the climax of the film. Our two main characters are supposed to be completing their character arcs where lessons are learned and conflicts are resolved, and the only way any of it makes even a lick of sense is if we as the audience start to invent explanations for ourselves. It is one thing to leave room for mystery, interpretation, and deduction on the part of your viewers. It is another thing to leave your script unfinished. I know some people think it's great when a story forces the audience to become authors, but hopefully by now you understand what I think of that perspective. Basically, it's not good. Obviously, not everything in a story needs to be explained in great detail, but that is not an excuse to explain nothing. There is no reason why Abuela does not still believe that everything is Mirabel's fault. Abuela got exactly what she was afraid of, and Mirabel was the apparent cause. Abuela has gained no new information or experience that would cause her to change this perspective. On the flip side, there was never any reason for Mirabel to blame her grandmother, but there is now also no reason for her to then take the blame herself and apologize, only to then seconds later accept that everything was Abuela's fault after all. There is no reason for either of them to believe that they now understand how the miracle works or why it broke. Their conflict was rooted in Abuela's suspicion that Mirabel was harming the magic, and Mirabel's sense that this was hurtful and unfair, and that she was being forgotten and ignored. Mirabel's actual culpability is just as much an open question now as ever before, and Abuela's apparent neglect of her granddaughter is really only supported by the family photo incident, and this singular event isn't even brought up at the moment when they supposedly heal their wounded relationship. A payoff can never rise higher than the quality of its setup. Having your characters simply blurt out the lessons that they've learned and declare their conflicts to be resolved is extremely unsatisfying when there's nothing to support those conclusions. This isn't leaving something up to interpretation. It's leaving it up to interpolation, where we have to finish the story because, as depicted, it doesn't make sense. When important gaps in either the plot or character progression can be filled equally well by a dozen different competing interpolations, then it means that none of those theories are well supported by evidence. If your story can mean anything, then what it actually means is
nothing at all.
If the audience can come up with 100 different ways to fill gaps in the story, it means there are too many gaps in the story. But I am once again venturing into tautological territory, so rant over, let's recap. To summarize, Abuela finds Mirabel beside the river, and they apologize to each other. As far as plot questions, I would still like to know what exactly is the connection between the relationships within the family and the magic of the Encanto. This has been hinted at many times, and several characters are acting as if they understood that relationship, but it hasn't been established in any way. Additionally, what exactly, in terms of an entity or being or something, is actually behind the Encanto? We would need to know this in order to understand, first of all, why was there magic that came about as a result of Pedro's death? What was the purpose of giving supernatural gifts to the family? And subsequently, what was the purpose of withholding a gift from Mirabel? These questions can only be answered if we understand the intentions behind whatever the source of the Encanto is. In terms of characters, Mirabel now blames the failing Encanto on her own selfish desires for recognition and esteem. She seems to understand her grandmother better after hearing a backstory that she was already aware of, and she is determined to somehow fix the family. Abuela believes that the family and the Encanto are broken because of her. She apologizes for letting her grief and fear get in the way of showing love to her family, and she believes that Mirabel was sent by Pedro as an answer to her prayer. On top of everything that we've already been through about why these two characters generally don't make a whole lot of sense, I would just like to ask why both Mirabel and Abuela now blame themselves when moments ago they were blaming each other. What exactly has changed? No idea. And secondly, why does Abuela consider Mirabel to be a gift from Pedro when she prayed to Pedro and asked for help last night? Moving on, Bruno is here and he's on a horse now, and he bursts out of the trees saying that none of this is Mirabel's fault and it was all because he had a vision and told her to go. Bruno, please, just stop talking. You literally told Mirabel minutes ago that the fate of the entire family was up to her. That means, by definition, that you believed whatever was about to happen would happen because of Mirabel. You don't get to backtrack and say that she didn't do this just because what happened was an apparent disaster. You don't get to say, it wasn't her, it was my vision's fault, when your vision, at least as you chose to interpret it, was that everything would depend on her. You cannot have your arepa and eat it too, sir. Anyway, he says he doesn't care what his mother thinks of him, and she runs up to give him a big ol' hug. The only time Abuela even mentions Bruno is when she says that he never cared about the family, but Bruno is making it sound like she has had a bad opinion of him for a long time. I mean, maybe she has, but we still have no idea why she would, and we don't talk about Bruno is not a reason. Abuela hasn't once expressed any dissatisfaction with how Bruno used his gift. In fact, she begged him to have a vision. Also, why does Mirabel look shocked to see Bruno? And why does Abuela look only mildly surprised? Abuela just found out in this moment that her son is still alive. She has had no idea where he's been or why, and at first she doesn't care. She's just happy to see him. That's wonderful, and it's fine, but he still has a ton of explaining to do. I would expect her to demand to know where he's been for the last 10 years and why. This could be a great moment for developing these two characters, but but instead of that, we get this.
I feel like I missed something important.
Yeah, you and me both, Bruno. You know what? I'm pretty sure I feel like I missed something important is going to be my subtitle for this video. Anyway, the trio then heads back to the rubble of their home, and Mirabel's parents are relieved to find her. They don't ask where she ran off to or why, but that's par for the course at this point. Augustine says they'll be okay, and Camilo says,
Not if we don't have a house. What? We don't have a house. I can't say we don't have a house? What is that? Not a house?
which, I'll admit, got a chuckle out of me. So, Mirabel launches into another song. Musically, it's a reprise of her introduction to the family madrigal. She says that the home needs a new foundation and that it may seem hopeless, but they'll get by just fine. I know that this is supposed to be the big moment where the heroine uses her newfound power and wisdom to set everything right, but why in the world is everyone looking at her with these giant puppy dog eyes like she's the only adult in a room full of children? Okay, I get why Antonio would look up to her this way, but why is everyone else giving her such rapt attention? She's a teenager, she doesn't know any more about the magic than anyone else, and when everything depended on her, the house and the miracle came crashing down. I do not understand why these lemmings are gaping at her like she holds the secrets to the universe. She's not even saying anything interesting or profound here, it's just generic, we can get through this stuff, and everyone's just beaming at her. Don't worry, everyone. I know you're all scared, but Mirabel knows what to do. She has the wisdom, the experience, and most importantly, she's the girl who's the key to everything. All right, I know that most teenagers already have a hyperinflated sense of their own virtue and wisdom, and I know that this is the sort of trope that features heavily in a lot of Disney movies, but that's precisely why this sort of thing annoys me. It should not be encouraged. It doesn't make any sense for them to be treating her this way, but at this point none of these characters have demonstrated anything that even approximates agency, so I suppose I can praise the movie for at least being consistent on that point. Mirabel says that the family is a glowing constellation and everybody wants to shine. No. Mirabel wants to shine. I guess we could say that about Isabella too. Maybe Camilo, but getting pleasure from entertaining people isn't really the same as wanting to shine. And in any case, that's it. Nobody else in the family is really all that concerned about attracting attention. Luisa and Dolores, in fact, seem to actively avoid it. So Mirabel here is projecting her own emotional baggage onto everyone else. That's not inconsistent with her character, but I don't know why nobody is calling her out on this. Well, that's not strictly true. After all, she is the main character and the girl who's the key to everything, so she has to be right. She then says, "The stars don't shine, they burn."
What are you talking about?
I can't even begin to understand what this is supposed to mean. Stars shine because they burn. These aren't different things. That's like saying fans don't blow air, they spin. I don't, I don't even know what else to say about this line. It just doesn't make any sense. She then tells Luisa, "I think it's time you learn you're more than just your gift." This lesson would be a great resolution to Luisa's character arc if the script had done anything to earn it. We just have Mirabel saying, "Hey, Luisa, like your defining character flaw? Well, here's a lesson that would help you grow out of it." It sounds like it should work in theory, but the problem is that neither Mirabel nor Luisa have gone through any kind of journey that would teach them this lesson. So, we just have the protagonist spouting platitudes and dispensing wisdom that she hasn't earned in the slightest. I also love that the magic is supposed to be broken at this point, but Luisa can still pick up this enormous piece of rubble. A stone this big would easily weigh over 1,000 pounds, and she can still stand it on end. Beyond that, why is she doing this anyway? Like, what's your plan here, Luisa? Where are you get? I don't know. Moving on, Abuela says, "I'm sorry I held on too tight, just so afraid I'd lose you too. The miracle is not some magic that you've got, the miracle is you." So this line is essentially the big lesson that Abuela is supposed to have learned. Even though, as I've pointed out, Abuela's consistency as a character leaves a lot to be desired, this is actually a good end point to her character arc. Her only persistent character flaw has been her tendency to overlook individual family members due to her preoccupation with larger concerns, like perpetuating the miracle and managing her household. Now that both the magic and the house are gone, she's actually in a situation where she has to love the members of her family simply for being her family because those other motivations have been forcibly removed. This through line gets a bit muddled, though, when we remember that even when Abuela believed the magic was in imminent danger, she didn't do anything to save it. Her response was to pretend that nothing was wrong, tell everyone to work harder, and tell Mirabel to stop trying to help. Telling Mirabel to back off makes sense, but I still do not understand why she gaslit everyone instead of asking for help, nor do I understand why she believed working harder would fix the magic. I can believe, in other words, that she would say, in effect, "I don't care how the magic works or how to fix it. If I have to give up the miracle in order to have my family, then so be it." I think that this is what the writers were going for, but this resolution to her arc is super rushed because so many of her actions throughout the film aren't consistent with her motivations, and because she was never actually put in a position where she had to choose between the magic and her family. So I think that the writers have created a reasonable start and end point to Abuela's character arc, but everything in between is a mess. Moving on, Bruno emerges from around the corner, and Julieta is the first and only character to react appropriately shocked upon seeing her missing brother for the first time in at least a decade. Remember that none of these people know where he has been or if he was even alive. Peppa looks like she's either watching a Hallmark movie or she just has heartburn. And although Camilo's expression is pretty funny, he just looks confused, which I know the feeling, buddy. Bruno tells Peppa that he's sorry about what happened at her wedding, which you'll recall is when he told her that it looked like it was going to rain, which she interpreted as a prediction of the future, which made her so upset that she caused it to rain. Bruno says that it wasn't a prophecy and he was just trying to express his love for her because he could tell she was nervous. Now, Bruno, I know that you're kind of quirky and you're kind of strange and you have a bit of an odd sense of humor. Like that's fine, okay? But why, pray tell, would you try to calm your sister's nerves by telling her that it's going to rain? I get that that's supposed to be a joke, like, oh, Peppa looks nervous, and when she's nervous, it rains, so it looks like it's going to rain because Peppa's nervous, but why would you say that, you absolute orange? If your goal was to express to her your brotherly love and assure her that everything was going to be okay, why not just say, oh, I don't know, hey, sis, just want you to know that I love you and that everything's going to be okay? But actually, I can allow that. Okay, like he was trying to be funny, he was trying to be sweet, and just it was all misinterpreted. Okay, you know what? That's fine. I can understand that that might happen. But why, dear sir, when it became apparent that your sister took your ill-advised words to be a prophecy that caused her to worry so much that it began to rain, would you not immediately correct the misunderstanding? And why, in the name of all that wears a grimy poncho, would you wait more than 20 years to apologize? Why wasn't this entire misunderstanding cleared up the day it happened? This was her wedding day. Dolores, her oldest child, is well into adulthood. I know that you've been inexplicably absent for about half of that time, but that means that you had at least a decade to have this conversation with Peppa, but you just didn't? Why?
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
He then says, let it in, let it out, let it rain, let it snow, let it go. I didn't think anything of this at first, but my wife pointed out to me that this might be a not so subtle reference to a certain song from a certain other movie. I have no idea if this was the intention, but all I can say is if you're going to reference other material, choose something good. Don't worry, Frozen. I'll get to you soon enough. I know this movie doesn't really deal with any of the logical implications of Peppa's powers, which is fine, I guess, but the consequences of Peppa just letting it go could easily be the annihilation of the entire town in many different ways, including inundation, pulverization, and/or starvation. Just saying. Bruno admits he has a lot of apologies to say, which, yeah, that's putting it mildly. Julieta, true to form, says that she's just glad he's home. Julieta is absolutely the right person to say this, so good job. We get more generic welcome home stuff from the others, and then, oh boy, Dolores says, yo, I knew he never left. I heard him every day. Okay, dear Dolores, if you heard Bruno inside the walls every day since he disappeared, then why, madam, did you not tell anybody? You didn't wait 2 minutes to spill the beans on Mirabel when she found Bruno's vision, and yet you held your tongue on your missing uncle's whereabouts for 10 years? Maybe she heard something but didn't know what it was. Maybe she could tell that it was Bruno but didn't know where he was. After all, she can hear things half a mile away, so how could she possibly be expected to pinpoint the source of the noise? You're being ridiculous, armchair. But no, these explanations don't hold up. She can identify Louisa by the sound of her eye twitching. She heard rats and knew that they were within the walls of their own house. She has just admitted that she was 100% aware that Tio Bruno was in the walls of the house, and she never mentioned it to anyone or tried to find him herself. Why? Thankfully, a crowd of townsfolk arrive to distract us from this abominable character. They come bearing tools and materials, and they say, lay down your load. We have no gifts, but we are many, and we'll do anything for you. So it seems that all of the goodwill this family has built up over the years has now come back around to save them in their hour of greatest need. I have no problems with this. This is a perfectly sensible thing for them to do, and we've seen many times how much they appreciate the service of the Madrigals. Well, at least the services of the Madrigals who actually do something, anyway. This is actually a really sweet moment, and it's one of the few payoffs that is completely earned. Even Mariano and his mother have come to help despite the fiasco of the night before, so that settles it. Isabella definitely doesn't deserve this guy. We see the various characters performing tasks to rebuild the house, and they remark on how things are different without their magical powers to help them. Strangely, Louisa says that sometimes she cries, as if that's a thing she couldn't do before. And Isabella's all like, wow, I have to actually nourish and take care of plants now. This sort of thing could have been great. Figuring out how to adjust to a life without their magic could have been a great opportunity for each of these characters to learn and grow. Isabella, before, made a really big deal about seeing her power grow and wondering what sorts of crazy things she'd be able to make, but now all of that is gone. Wouldn't it be interesting to see how she handles all of those dreams being yanked away from her? Wouldn't it be interesting to see how Peppa reacts to the revocation of her curse, or to see Julieta agonizing over the fact that she's now unable to heal and nurture people the way she once did? But instead of that, we're just tossing this idea in 5 minutes before the credits. Character growth as a result of making choices in response to adversity? What even is that anyway? We then see Mariano looking a little bummed, and Mirabel asks what's wrong. His reply is, I just have so much love inside. I have to admit, on my first viewing, I thought this was the funniest line in the entire film. I'm not really sure why. I think it was just the combination of this poor guy who's really gotten shafted in the last couple of days and the voice actor's over the top delivery, but it did get a laugh out of me. I guess Mariano's figured out that he's not going to be tending Isabella's garden after all, or maybe she dumped him off screen or something. I don't know. Anyway, Mirabel mentions that she has a cousin, and oh no. No, 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 no. Run, Mariano, run! Get away while you still can! No! But it's too late. Dolores shows up and regales Mariano with a brief list of his virtues, including that he is good to his mother and he writes poetry. Yeah, he really seems like a great guy, despite his questionable taste in women. But it baffles me that she then says, would you wake up and notice me? As far as we can tell, Dolores hasn't made the slightest effort to even speak to Mariano before, which I suppose is to her credit, since trying to cozy up to her cousin's boyfriend would be one of the few things that could actually make her character worse at this point. But why is she telling Mariano to wake up and notice her like he's been ignoring her obvious advances? My dear Dolores, if he is as good a man as you think he is, he's not going to pay any romantic attention to you while courting your cousin at the same time. But, tragically, the poor idiot falls head over heels for her googly eyes. I tried to save you, Mariano. I really did. Mirabel and her grandmother admire the handiwork of their newly built home. It's hard to tell for sure, but it looks like only a few hours have passed since the last house fell down, and if that is the case, all I can say is, wow. They both acknowledge that the home isn't perfect, but that neither are they. In order to finish the home, Mirabel needs to add the last piece, the knob on the front door. There is an obvious parallel here to the magical door that vanished on her all those years ago, and they have saved this symbolic gesture for her. It's nice. Everyone tells her that she burns bright and that she has been brave. I'm not sure what this is supposed to mean, since once again, as far as anyone knows, including as far as Mirabel knows, her quest to fix things, a quest that she admitted was driven largely by selfish motives, ultimately destroyed the home and the miracle. It's possible that they are all now of the opinion that losing the magic was for the best, but once again, I have to ask how and why they have arrived at this conclusion. Such a sudden and drastic change in perspective for every single member of the family requires, I think, a little bit more development than this. We also have the theme of things being perfect or imperfect thrown in here again, and this is, I guess, supposed to show that Abuela has now learned to accept imperfections, but I don't think that perfectionism was ever Abuela's problem. I mean, we do hear her say a couple of times that she wants things to go perfectly, but she didn't have high standards for her own sake. She believed that keeping things perfect, whatever that means, was necessary to maintain the miracle, even though we still don't know why she believed this. And when things didn't go perfectly, she didn't freak out. When Mirabel sets fire to the decorations, Abuela remained calm and kind. Antonio's gift ceremony didn't go perfectly. Mirabel had to help him, and Abuela didn't say anything about it. In fact, whenever Abuela corrects somebody or gets upset, she generally has good reasons for it. She frequently reminds Peppa to keep her mood in check because disasters can occur if she doesn't. Mirabel crashing her cousin's party by screaming about the house falling to pieces is a serious problem, so of course Abuela was concerned about it. And the fact that she then pretends nothing is wrong is not evidence of perfectionism. Obsessing over making things perfect is not the same as obsessing over making things appear to be perfect. Isabella's proposal dinner wasn't less than perfect, it was a complete circus. Abuela being angry about everyone's behavior at dinner was perfectly reasonable. So, yeah, Abuela had some flaws, but I don't think perfectionism was ever one of them. Moving on, Abuela says, "Open your eyes, what do you see?" Mirabel looks at her reflection in the doorknob and says, "I see me. All of me." We'll dive into this a little bit more in just a second, but I just want to point out here that Mirabel's character arc concludes with her getting every one of her selfish desires. She is no longer the only person without a gift, since nobody has a gift. She is the center of everyone's attention, and everyone is telling her how special and wonderful she is. She has not changed at all. Instead, everyone else has changed around her. The only thing Mirabel learned was to believe that she is special and wonderful just as she is. She grew by realizing that she didn't need to grow. So she puts the knob in the door, and magical lights swirl around the new house, and it comes alive. Casita is back, baby! Everyone enters the house, and we hear a reprise of Colombia Mi Encanto, and it seems that everyone has their powers back, just like that. But all is not exactly the same. Well, Antonio is exactly the same, but Isabella looks like she's lost a paintball fight and she's making crazy plants instead of just flowers. Luisa is strong again, but she's taken a break. Pepa is doing a happy dance, which makes hail? Okay. Anyway, the family congregates for a photo, this time including Mirabel, and the credits roll. Alright, so to summarize this final scene, the family reunites and apologies and expressions of love are made. The townsfolk help to build a new home for the Madrigals. Mariano and Dolores are now a thing, which I suppose also means that Mariano and Isabella have broken up, unless there's something strange going on in this family that we don't know about. The new house transforms into a reincarnation of Casita, and the magical gifts return. And, of course, the family is happy now. The biggest questions I have is number one, if the Encanto was initially created by one man sacrificing his life in order to protect his family, why and how does it now return as a result of a teenage girl replacing a doorknob in order to prove how special she is? These things have no relationship with each other, which by this point isn't surprising, but gee, it sure just would be nice if anything about this magic was explained. And regarding the magic, everybody acts like the problem is now solved, but since we have no idea why the magic failed in the first place, we'd have to ask, is it possible for the magic to die a second time? Without knowing what the root of the problem even was, we have no idea if it's been solved, and therefore we don't know if the family is still in jeopardy. In terms of characters, Mirabel is now looked up to and admired by everyone despite having done nothing admirable that anyone knows about. She still does not have a magical gift, but doesn't feel bad about that anymore. And she believes that stars don't shine, but instead, they burn. Abuela is okay with things being imperfect, and she believes that her family is of greater value than the Encanto. Bruno is slow to apologize for misunderstandings. Pepa, Julieta, Augustine, and Felix are quick to forgive and welcome Bruno back. Casita is apparently capable of reincarnation. Mariano is hardworking, respects his mother, writes poetry, but is romantically fickle. And Dolores, of course, really likes Mariano and kept Bruno's location a secret for 10 years. You already know the parts of this that don't make sense. Why do so much about so many of these characters make no sense? The only miscellaneous note I have here is that Peppa causes hail when she's happy, which seems a bit strange based on what we've been told so far. But that is it. That is the plot of Disney's Encanto.